The biggest challenge we face, Mufti, especially engaging with people, is the normalization of riba. Like, I'm talking about in these countries. I know in other areas it's very difficult. When you were describing Zimbabwe, I just trying to think, like, from a fiqh perspective, it's just, all bets are off, so to speak. But here, where we have an established kind of system and framework and everything else, like, riba is just so accepted, and they just can't think of anything outside of riba.
I think one of the reasons is because they don't have an alternative according to them, or they haven't been introduced to any alternatives. And what I've noticed is whenever someone comes up with something Islamic and they say, look, this is an alternative to riba, they just sideline it because it's not mainstream and that's it, it's not going to work. But unfortunately, they don't realize that is the solution. Because over time, look at the credit crunches that have happened and the number of suicides that have taken place as a result of people who've lost their belongings simply because they couldn't pay the monthlies anymore. People who drive cars and houses, they have houses and so on. In most cases, they have a loan that they've taken from the bank, so it's not actually theirs. They're going to pay for it for the next 20 years. What they didn't take into consideration is you might just lose that source of income. Then what's going to happen? So I think it's very important to explain to people that there must be some alternative here, and that alternative is actually there, and here it is. Speaking about Zimbabwe and what you were saying earlier, one of the strangest things is the pegging of monies onto gold.
Yeah.
So say, for example, if I came to you and said, listen, I need some money, and you told me, how much do you want? And I told you I need 5 million. 5 million meaning maybe $500. And you said, listen, I don't want any riba, I don't want interest, I don't want anything. Here's 5 million. You give it back to me as 5 million next week. Next week came and I did not return it for some reason. Now what happens? Now, if you leave it for one more week in a country like Zimbabwe, that 5 million actually, which was worth $500 will become $250. Then it will be the house that we're living in, my father's house. He purchased it in 1979, 1980 for $17,000. $17,000, today that house is probably worth 1.7 million, right? The same currency. But if I didn't pay you for some reason, and then your grandchild comes in and says, hey, listen, sorry, my dad and my grandfather didn't pay you, here's your money, gave you 17,000, I can't even buy a chicken, right? Is it fair? So that's why I say even scholars who've studied wouldn't understand that is unfair. You've got to give the value of the money and not the money, because it's not actually money, it's just a fraud. Astaghfirullah.
Yeah.
So people were pegging it on the US dollar to say, listen, that 500,000 I owe, that it's worth 500 US. The day you give it back to me, I want 500 US. It's not wrong to say that, because I'm saying give me back the 500 US. I've had, as a mufti, so many disputes that have come to me of people who owe others money and they came to give them the exact amount later, so late, but now it's worthless. We've issued fatwas to say you've got to give the value of the money because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a loophole. And then I started telling people, do not peg it on the dollar, peg it on gold. Because the dollar is equally vulnerable, but obviously it fluctuates less. If it's 120, 121, 122, but that's still called fluctuation. People with bigger amounts would lose. They would look at the 0.01 of the cent because it's a big amount. But if you take a look at pegging it on gold, whenever you give it back to me, I've given you 10 grams of gold. Whenever you give it back to me, give me back the value of 10 grams of gold. Thank you so much. You never lose. If anything, you'd get such a figure that it would be much more in figure terms, but it's still the same. I gave you this much and that's what I want back.
I actually did a contract with somebody based on gold. I needed some money and they helped me out. And I can't explain the feeling of ease doing it pegged to gold, because we spoke about the Sharia earlier and how the Sharia beautifully gives everyone their rights. And when you're speaking about no one's rights are overlooked.
So I wanted to develop an app and I spoke to a developer, but we couldn't come to an agreement with some of the exchanges where I said, especially for countries that have hyperinflation, that if you owe someone money, let's have an app that immediately pegs it onto gold, and every time I return an amount, the moment of return, I look in, I can punch in how much I've given you in the local currency, and it will automatically deduct it in the day's rate of the gold that was there. So I know that I've given you back maybe much more in terms of the local currency, but the gold is being calculated according to the value of the moment that I gave you the money, which differs from hour to hour in some cases of hyperinflation. So we wanted to create the app, but we needed to have a contract with XE and the others, which we failed in. But inshallah, one day someone will do what I've just said, inshallah. It will be a major, major breakthrough. The reason is many Muslims want to give loans to others, but they just want to hold the value of their money. So they end up not giving you the loan because they say, I'm going to lose if I give this guy money for 2 years. It's not a matter of losing. Let's peg it on gold. And gold also, the value can fluctuate a little bit this way, that way. If it's going to be in favor of that person, accept it. It's part of what Allah's ordained.
So, are you going to be talking a little bit more about Riba?
No, I think, alhamdulillah, I think for our audience, it's really good. On that gold piece, if anyone wants help on that, because I actually created the spreadsheet doing exactly that. So by gram, and it picks it up what the value is, and then it says this is the amount. And so
May Allah bless you. Please consider the app that we had wanted to develop and failed. Perhaps you might succeed with that.
Allah bless you.
Inshallah, inshallah. Now, as we become more wealthy, there is the famous hadith about the poor entering paradise long before the rich.
One of the reasons is they have to give hisab, isn't it? They have to, every penny that came in, and like the hadith says that your feet are not moved until you answer certain questions. What it means is the first few things you're going to be on. One of them is, where did you earn this from and where did you spend it? So if you've got a large amount, you're going to have a long... I always give the example of walking through the airports. When you've got so many bags, they stop you. If you've got just one hand piece, no one even looks in your direction.
Well, so I think you've also answered that, because I was going to ask, how can we balance that while being wealthy and wanting to earn money, but at the same time wanting to enter Jannah quickly?
I think to ensure halal and haram, that's what it is. To make sure that it's dignified. It becomes second nature, because initially you have to just worry about every single deal. The minute you start getting the ball rolling, you realize, listen, I don't need this, I don't need that. I remember a guy who turned down a massive deal simply because it was not structured correctly according to Islam. And he told me 2 years later he had a deal 10 times the size. 2 years later. And for 2 years his friends were telling him, no, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that, come on, it was your opportunity, it was your chance, and so on. Not a matter of chance. Because he left something for the sake of Allah, Allah multiplied it. But there was a window, 2 whole years.
Be patient, don't you?
Inshallah.